famed for its almost perfect symmetry, known the world over as the symbol of India. It is recognized by the United Nations as one of the most important structures ever created. A physical demonstration of a king's devotion for his queen.
For most people who visit it, they think of it as a symbol of love. It's the story behind it that is paramount.
Yet the identity of the architect remains one of the monument's greatest mysteries. And it is also said that the man behind the structure, Shah Jahan, was to build a second monument, a black Taj. By investigating its origins in Islamic architecture and through archaeological evidence, we reveal the truth about this jewel in the crown of India as we open the mystery files on the Taj Mahal. One of the greatest love affairs in Indian history has come to an end. The Emperor Shah Jahan is grieving for the loss of his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. As an expression of his love, he creates one of the most magnificent buildings ever constructed, the Taj Mahal. Dr. Giles Tillotson is an architectural historian.
The Taj Mahal is a tomb that was built initially for the wife of the fifth Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, Mumtaz Mahal.
The Taj Mahal is perhaps one of the most public declarations of lost love ever seen.
The story, the human story, the love story, the grieving husband, the beautiful wife, has imprinted itself on our imagination so strongly that when we approach the thing, it's almost as though we're not approaching a building at all, but we're approaching a relationship, or even a person. As if the Taj Mahal were an embodiment of Mumtaz Mahal herself.
But the myth has it that the Shah is not yet finished. He plans a second monument across the Jumna River.
There is a long-standing myth that Shah Jahan's intention had been to build his own tomb as a sort of replica of the Taj, but in black marble, not in white.
But before he can start work on this other Taj, he is put under house arrest by his own son, eager to seize power ahead of his brothers. The second Taj is never built. Instead, the Shah is buried alongside his wife in the original Taj. It's a compelling story, but is it true? 1631. Almost 30 years after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, the borders of the Mughal Empire stretch from modern-day Pakistan across to Bengal and down into southern India. Marine Chida Razvi is currently studying Mughal mausolea.
The Mughals are the Islamic rulers of India. They were descended from Genghis Khan, and they were very proud of their heritage.
The Mughal leader, Shah Jahan, is in Burhanpur on military campaign. With him is one of his wives.
Shah Jahan had 3 wives. Mumtaz was in fact the first wife to whom he got engaged, but at the time of their betrothal they were both children, and so the marriage wasn't solemnized at that point.
Mumtaz Mahal was the granddaughter of a high-ranking Mughal courtier. Although the marriage was arranged for political reasons, it develops into something much deeper over time.
They do become very close, and it's clear from the contemporary sources that there is a genuine bond of affection between them.
19 years into their marriage, Mumtaz is with the emperor on campaign on the Deccan Plateau. She is heavily pregnant with the couple's 14th child.
One of the features of Mumtaz Mahal's life is that she accompanied her husband on a great many of his campaigns. She wasn't always left behind in the opulent palace in Agra, but endured traveling conditions with him.
In June that year, Mumtaz gives birth to a baby girl, Gauhar Ara. But the labor proves to be too much for the 38-year-old queen. She dies shortly afterwards.
The court historians describe Shah Jahan, first of all, refusing to speak to anybody for several days, and then his beard turning white overnight.
Shah Jahan is so devastated by his loss that he considers giving up his throne.
He's held back from that, partly by, obviously, his sense of responsibility. His heir at that time would have been his eldest son, Dara Shikoh, who would have been only about 15 or 16.
On his return to Agra, Shah Jahan picks a site for the permanent resting place of his beloved Mumtaz, a most extraordinary mausoleum. It is an architectural masterpiece renowned for its symmetry. Architectural historian George Michel has written extensively on Indian art and architecture.
The symmetry of the Taj is something which is extremely controlled because mathematics, proportion, are the elements of great architecture and also God's design. So in the Islamic view, mathematics is the underpinning of perfection.
To represent a divine form of perfection, the architect uses perfect shapes to create it. The designers of the Taj Mahal construct the complex using a grid system, guided by the geometric principles of Islamic art and architecture.
There is this geometry, and some of these geometries, can go on forever. They are infinitely repeatable. And so the building itself can sort of ripple outwards mathematically.
Squares and polygons are used to achieve divine perfection. The aim appears to be to create a central line running through the complex around which the structure is symmetrical. The so-called concept of centrality. Around the building are 4 minarets, each one standing at a height of 43 meters. There is a vast garden containing numerous fruit trees, exotic plants and fountains.
You'll never find a monumental Mughal tomb not associated with a garden. There's a very strong link with these sites with the Gardens of Paradise.
The charbagh, or garden, is an integral part of the Mughal tomb design. The geometric design of the Taj Mahal extends into the gardens, which are divided into 4 by water channels that meet at a pool in the center. They represent the 4 rivers of paradise.
The garden at the Taj is a vision of eternity and paradise, and that is very Islamic. That comes out of a long, long tradition of flowing waters in a very dry, parched, arid landscape.
Taken together, the building and gardens are perfectly symmetrical, with Mumtaz buried on the center line.
The Taj Mahal and the gateway to the garden complex form the 2 endpoints of this north-south axis. And then we have the bilateral symmetry, which is when we have on opposite sides then corresponding structures. So for example, we have the mosque on one side of the Taj Mahal and the guest house on the other side, which despite serving a completely different function, is built to mirror the mosque. So the symmetry is maintained throughout the entire complex.
However, so little is written of the building of the Taj that the identity of the architect remains one of the monument's greatest mysteries.
It tended to actually be the convention in the Mughal period that a building was associated with the patron rather than with a specific individual who actually constructed it.
A claim was made as early as 1640 by a Portuguese clergyman that the architect was a Venetian goldsmith, Geronimo Veroneo.
It really has no secure foundation at all. It's a passing remark by one Father Sebastian Manrique, an Augustinian friar, who attributes the design of the building to Veroneo without offering any kind of evidence.
Sebastian Manrique visited the Taj Mahal in 1640, but he writes that Veroneo died in Lahore before the two could meet. This suggests that Manrique is merely repeating hearsay. There is no mention in either Mughal or European sources that attributes Geronimo Veroneo as the designer of this building. It is unlikely he's the architect.
The most likely figure for the principal architect is Ustad Ahmed Lahori.
We know he was an architect of the Red Fort in Delhi, and his son has written that he was also the architect of the Taj Mahal.
A structural element incorporated into the design of the Taj may also point to Lahori being the architect. Analysis of the 4 minarets in the 1980s reveal that each one is built to lean away slightly from the main structure.
This is commonly said to have been done in case of earthquakes in the region.
Civil engineer Ed McCann explains.
That would have been very much in the minds of the people who were designing and building this as a great big monument. And so it's possible they thought that if they took the minarets and leant them over slightly, that when the ground did shake, they would fall outwards.
The problem is, Agra rarely suffers from earthquakes. Closer investigation of the possible architect reveals a reason why a building in a low-risk earthquake zone is built to withstand earth tremors. His last name, Lahori, suggests he originates from another place.
This was a convention of the time where people would come from. It tended to be added to their name. So we know that Ustad Ahmad Lahori potentially was from Lahore.
Lahore is now in modern-day Pakistan, an area known to suffer from severe earthquakes. Due to his experience, Lahori may have incorporated earthquake-proof elements into his minaret design, especially as a massive earthquake in 1505, centered in northwest Nepal, 500 kilometers from Agra, did cause tremors there. So Lahori could have been the architect. Lying to the north of the Taj Mahal is another stretch of water, the Jumna River.
The river is like a sort of motorway, the highway that runs through the city, rather like thinking of the River Thames flowing through Tudor London. It's the easiest way of getting around. And the leading members of the court each had a sort of river-facing garden along one bank or the other. So you could see the Taj Mahal as simply the last in the line and the largest and most magnificent of these riverfront estates, if you like.
Not only is this land prime Indian real estate, the river also has a practical purpose. It provides the water to irrigate the gardens and feed the water channels, so vital for this vision of paradise. Professor John Fritz is an archaeologist who has worked on the Taj Mahal site.
Water was gravity fed. And the Mughals were very, very clever in providing water for their palaces and their tomb complexes. And the Taj Mahal has an enormous water collecting system.
But building such a great monument would have been no easy task on the banks of the river.
From time to time, when it rains a lot, this river will go into flood and it will literally pick up all of the soft, sandy material at the bottom of the river and take it away. So if you're building right on top of that, then the material gets washed away and you fall into the river. And so it's a huge engineering challenge on a project of this scale.
Aware of the difficulties of building so close to the riverbank, the team working on the Taj Mahal uses an ingenious way of supporting the structure.
If we go down beneath the plinth, what we can see under there are hundreds and hundreds of these caissons, which are kind of deep foundations that go down, and they go through all the soft stuff that goes with rivers down to the bedrock that's underneath, so that it's really solid. And those foundations don't get scoured away. That material stays there, and even if the rest of it gets washed away, that stuff's solid, and so the building stands up.
Most of what we know of the Taj comes from the Mughal chronicles, called the Padchanama. Yet nothing is written here, or anywhere else yet discovered, that suggests the builders were treated badly. Whoever did build the mausoleum used traditional Mughal construction materials from local quarries. The Taj looks to be made entirely from marble, but it's not.
It's actually made out of big lumps of sandstone, which are used to form the walls, or the outer skins of walls, and literally hundreds of thousands of clay bricks. And then on the outside, they've put marble.
Earlier Mughal tombs, such as that of Shah Jahan's grandfather, Akbar, reveal how grand the Taj Mahal is compared to its predecessors.
There is a hierarchy of materials used in Mughal construction, and white marble was typically kept for either accents of a building or for emphasizing the structure or for the most important parts of a structure. So Akbar's tomb, for example, the very top level is entirely of white marble.
Marble cladding was usually only used for highlights. But for the Taj Mahal, the Shah wanted the whole structure covered. And the extravagant decoration does not end here. Throughout the mausoleum, a decorative art form called pietra dura is inlaid in the white marble.
The pietra dura decoration of the Taj Mahal is particularly famous. The floral decoration and the raised, embossed, carved images of flowers, it's remarkably beautiful.
Despite the attention to detail, just 18 years after construction begins, the Taj complex is completed. From the beginning, it was meant to impress.
The buildings of the Mughals were always very strongly associated with the people who built them, and they did also stand as monuments to a person's rule. It not only served as a signifier of Shah Jahan's love for his wife, but it also served as a signifier of his reign and of his importance and of his legacy.
However, the love story between Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal rivals any other significance the building has. Whatever its symbolism, few would dispute that the Taj Mahal ranks as the greatest example of Indo-Islamic architecture. However, whether the monument is intended to be unique is something that has been questioned since its completion.
One of the most enduring myths about the Taj Mahal is that what you see represents only half the scheme.
Across the Jamna River are some intriguing ruins made of brick similar to those used to build the Taj Mahal. They suggest that the emperor may have had a final, spectacular piece of symmetry planned. A second mausoleum.
The seed of the idea is in the writings of a Frenchman, Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who happened to be kind of wandering around India dealing in jewels at the time. And he says in his writing that the emperor intended to build his own tomb on the other side of the river.
Because Tavernier is accurate about India's political events, at the time he seems a trustworthy source. Over the years, the story of a second mausoleum has developed into the legend of the Black Taj.
That Taj, which had no color, got color. It became black. And why it became black and how it became black, nobody knows. But now the idea of a black Taj Mahal is embedded in everybody's imagination.
So widespread has the story of the Black Taj become that a team of Indian and American archaeologists decided to investigate further. John Fritz was on the team.
The excavations that I was involved in at the Taj Mahal were part of an ongoing sequence of excavations. They first started in the 1970s when the Archaeological Survey of India undertook to try and find remains of this Taj that was supposed to have been started by Shah Jahan.
The team carried out a series of excavations over several years. They discovered remnants of some small structures.
In the early 1990s, they found the remains of some collapsed buildings, Sanskrit buildings, all built with typical Shah Jahan architectural pieces.
These weren't the remains of a second mausoleum, but those of a garden complex.
They found the remains of an octagonal pond with fountains and also some pavilions which indicated that in fact the area contained a garden rather than foundations for another mausoleum.
They were the remnants of a Mehta Bagh, a moonlight garden.
This was intended to be a pleasure garden, a garden where people would come in the twilight and in the evening hours.
It would be a place where the Shah and his court could come and relax after the heat of the day.
The width of the Mehtab Bagh, which is marked by 2 octagonal little towers, precisely aligns with the width of the Taj terrace and garden, which also has towers. So it's not an accident these things were laid out with the river flowing in between. It was like the complex of the Taj extends all the way across the river.
With water channels dividing the gardens into 4, the Mehtab Bagh reflects the original Taj Mahal gardens perfectly, providing yet more symmetry. It suggests that the Mehtab Bagh was always meant to be an integral part of Shah Jahan's design. And perhaps the myth of a second Taj is not entirely without credence.
The reflecting pool was enormous, 35 meters across. When the court was sitting in the pavilion on the north side of the reflecting pond, let's say at twilight or in the full moonlight, and looking at the Taj rising above the compound wall, and also looking at the reflection in the pond, it would have looked like there were 2 Tajes. There certainly was a Taj, the real Taj rising above, but there was also the shimmering Taj that was seen in the water.
The moonlight garden and pool complete the Taj Mahal complex. It is an image of perfection through symmetry. But this perfection would be thrown out of balance with Shah Jahan's death. In 1657, Shah Jahan falls ill and loosens his grip on power. His 4 sons make a play for the throne. Within a year, Aurangzeb, Jahan's 3rd son, seizes power and imprisons his father. His only consolation is having his eldest daughter, Jahanara, as his chief companion. 8 years later, the emperor dies.
His funeral was the responsibility of his favoured daughter, Jahanara, and it seems to have been her decision to have put him alongside her mother in the Taj Mahal.
Shah Jahan lies next to his wife, but off the center line of the Taj Mahal, destroying the very image of perfection he tried so hard to achieve.
The Taj Mahal was originally intended to house just the body of Mumtaz Mahal, which is why she would have been completely centered in the structure.
It is not recorded if the Shah intended this for his burial, or if his daughter disobeyed his wishes.
It's very difficult to answer the question about Shah Jahan's intentions regarding his own burial because of the Mughal Civil War. So whatever intentions he may have had were not recorded. They might have changed over the course of time.
Perhaps it was ignorance that led her to place her father's body alongside Mumtaz. Or perhaps, knowing the devotion he felt to his dead wife, Jahanara wanted to see them together again at last. Within the cool, white marble of the Taj Mahal lie 2 of history's most devoted lovers, united in death.
Discover one of ancient history's biggest heists in The Egyptian Job, brand new on Sunday at 8. Mystery Files is back after the break.